You're still bound by the torch.
Good evening. I would like to call the December 11th, 2023 New Albany Plain Local Board of Education meeting to order. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Mr. McCullough?
Here.
Mr. Darrow?
Here.
Vice President Newhoff?
Here.
President Kalinowski?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members have had the opportunity to review the minutes from our November 20th, 2023 board meeting. May I have a motion and a second to approve those meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Newmoff and Mr. Darrow. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Vice President Newhoff?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is an opportunity for public participation.
We need to approve the agenda.
Oh, next, we'll approve the agenda. Superintendent Sawyers, are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda? With none, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So second.
Mr. Wilson and Mr. McClellan. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Vice President Newhoff?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is an opportunity for public participation, and we do not have any participants this evening, so we will move into communications to the board, beginning with superintendent's items. Superintendent Sawyers.
President Kalinowski, members of the Board of Education, we begin this evening with Mr. Emery, the Director of Elementary Education, for an update on Senate Bill 288 here as well, please. Scott.
President Kalinowski, Vice President Newhoff, and members of the board, thank you for allowing me time to provide an update about our upcoming implementation of lessons required by Senate Bill 288. At your February and May meetings, I shared with you information about Senate Bill 288, which includes language that is referred to as Aaron's Law. Aaron's Law in Ohio requires annual lessons in sexual abuse prevention in grades kindergarten to 6th, beginning this school year. Aaron's Law is named after Erin Marin, who, after working in her home state of Illinois to pass legislation requiring sexual abuse prevention lessons in 2009, has worked to expand the program to 38 states, including Ohio, earlier this year. During the second semester of last school year, the school counselors and I reviewed several programs that would meet the requirements of Aaron's Law. As shared at the May 15th meeting, we selected a program called the Second Step Child Protection Unit. We chose the Second Step Child Protection Unit because it's highly aligned with Aaron's Law and will assist our elementary students' ability to recognize, report, and refuse unsafe and unwanted touches, including sexually abusive touch. Second Step is also included on the state's recommended program list. After the May 15th Board of Education meeting, I held 5 open houses later that month that offer daytime and evening opportunities for parents to review the Second Step materials. Dates and locations for these open houses were shared in the elementary parent newsletters in May as part of an FAQ document that explained Senate Bill 288. During the first semester of this school year, the school counselors worked to consolidate and refine the Second Step program into the New Albany K-6 Sexual Abuse Lesson Guide for Parents. A key component of Senate Bill 288 is that parents have the right to review the instructional materials and may choose to excuse their children from the lessons. Our guide allows parents to review all lessons grades K to 6, not just the one lesson specific to their child's grade level. In November, I presented information about Aaron's Law to the parent-teacher organizations at the ELC, primary school, and intermediate school. For PTO leaders who requested access, they received the latest draft of our K-6 sexual abuse parent guide for their review and feedback. For teachers and staff, we shared information on Aaron's Law in each staff newsletter and provided access to the lesson guide so they could also provide feedback prior to the lessons being taught next semester. At the January and February in-service days, the counselors and I will discuss the lessons in more depth with our staff and ensure that all teachers complete the required professional development in child sexual abuse prevention that's part of the law. We plan to begin teaching lessons with our 3rd grade students in January. Similar to how I manage our 5th grade puberty and 6th grade human reproduction lessons, I'll share the K-6 lesson guide with all 3rd grade parents in advance of the actual instruction to allow them 1 month of time to review. They will receive the lesson guide this week by email, along with a reminder in early January about their option to opt out. As with the current practice in 5th and 6th grades, when I email the lesson materials to parents, a simple reply to me is all that's needed to opt their child out of the instruction. We will follow a similar process for all the other grade levels the months prior to those lessons being taught in February, March, and April. I am fortunate to work in a school district in a community like ours when implementing a new program, particularly one that addresses a challenging topic. Our school counseling team in New Albany has worked diligently to prepare a program that will benefit children, and our parents have been engaged, supportive, and have provided meaningful feedback to the draft of the lesson guide. So while I always have some pause when the state dictates local programming, we're fortunate here to have a great partnership between staff and parents to work together to make sure a new mandate will benefit New Albany school children. In closing, I want to provide a quick update about another piece of legislation that I spoke to you about in February and May. House Bill 123 is called the SAVE Act, which stands for Safety and Violence Education. In the elementary grades, the SAVE Act impacts students in grade 6. The law expands content beyond Aaron's Law to include required annual lessons in suicide awareness, social inclusion, and safety training, which, like Aaron's Law, begin this school year. For House Bill 123, we must choose from one of the state-approved programs. 6th grade school counselor Kimberly Waltman and I have been working on a 6th grade SAVE Act lesson guide for parents, similar in format to the K-6 sexual abuse prevention lesson guide. We plan to teach these lessons in the spring. As with Senate Bill 288, parents will receive advance notice, and all 6th grade parents will have the ability to opt their children out of these lessons. I'll report at a future meeting about our progress in completing the 6th grade parent guide. This time I can answer any questions you may have about Senate Bill 288. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Just a couple other updates. Thanks, Scott, for the board. First, I want to publicly congratulate Sandy Reed again. She has returned from Antarctica. So she was one of 50 teacher fellows selected by National Geographic in the Lynn Lab expedition. So she is back. We congratulate on her blogs that she shared from Antarctica with our students and families, and look forward to the lessons that she'll incorporate into the E3 lab. Winter concerts are in full swing. Choir concerts tonight, 7 o'clock. Band, choir, and orchestra students have done an outstanding job at all of their concerts, so it's not over yet. There's still several concerts this week. If you haven't had an opportunity to attend, please do, to celebrate the many talents of our students. Winter recess begins officially on Thursday, December 21st. So school is not over yet. We have another week and a half. So please finish strong. Students come back on January 3rd, 2024. So the calendar for the school year is posted on the district website. If you have any questions, you can find it on the district website or contact the school district or your building, and they'll direct you accordingly. Thank you.
Next is a plea update. Mrs. Arco.
Good evening, Superintendent Sawyers and the Board of Education and all other staff that are present. It's great, Michael, that you just commented on Sandy Reed because that's one of the highlights that I wanted to share with you this evening. No, it's great. She needs all the accolades she can get. She is, as we know, the Easton E3 Learning Lab teacher. And yes, she just returned from Antarctica. Her experience was sponsored through National Geographic and the Lindblad expeditions. She was there for 3 weeks as part of a teacher fellowship. While there, she got to meet with National Geographic photographers and naturalists, a NASA scientist, a historian, who is actually one of the world's experts on the Shackleton expedition, and the wildlife photographer of the year, who specializes in drone photography. Sandy will spend the rest of the school year working with students in different grade levels, sharing what she learned and creating authentic projects that promote the National Geo Explorer mindset and inquiry science. So we're so proud of her and thrilled that we get to benefit from her. And then also, residential solar expert Catherine Hope Cunningham came to speak to Jessica Whitehead's applied engineering class about solar energy technology, how it can be great, also not great at times as an alternative energy source in a residential setting. This was a great accompaniment to Jessica's unit on alternative energy sources. And she wants to thank the New Albany High School PTO for sponsoring Catherine to come in. Short, but wonderful.
Thank you very much. Next is a review of our student belonging survey results. Superintendent Sawyers.
My pleasure to welcome Mrs. Nowak, Director of Assessment and Accountability, to the podium.
Well, good evening, Superintendent Sawyers, President Kalinowski, Vice President Newmoff, and members of the board. It's my pleasure to share the results of the 2023-2024 Sense of Belonging Survey results with you this evening. As always, our work is grounded in our statement of purpose to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. Administering our belonging survey aligns with our continuous improvement plan goal benchmark 5, which is to enhance school culture, social emotional well-being, and stakeholder satisfaction. It also aligns with our building an inclusive campus culture, or BIC framework, to ensure students feel safe, supported, and connected. The Student Belonging Survey was administered in October of 2023 to students in grades 1 through 12 with the following objective: to understand students' sense of belonging at New Albany Plain Local Schools. Survey questions focused on how well district, faculty, staff, and administration, as well as how other students know you as a person, help you, are kind to you, and provide a feeling of belonging. One of the district's goals, as I stated, is to build an inclusive campus culture where all students feel safe, supported, and welcome. To help the district focus our efforts in helping all students, they completed this short survey. Parents did have the opportunity to preview the survey for grades 1 to 3 and 4 through 12, as well as to opt out their student if desired. This is the third year for the Belonging Survey. It was also administered in December of 2022 and September of 2021. As a reminder, there were a few adjustments to the survey last year. Previously, grades 1 through 2 took an early elementary version with graphics for responses that indicated thumbs up, thumbs to the side, and thumbs down. Last year, for consistency across the primary school, we made the adjustment to have a grades 1 to 3 version of the survey and grades 4 to 12 version of the survey. Here's our number of responses for grades 1 to 12. For the 23-24 Belonging Survey, 3,665 students completed the survey, or about 81% of eligible students in grades 1 through 12. If you look at the survey responses by grade level on this chart over the past 3 years, you can look and see what that looks like from an elementary to secondary perspective. As stated earlier, there is a primary version of the survey, the grades 1 through 3 survey. Here's an example question. This question says, do you feel people at school care about you? And you'll see there's a thumbs up for yes to the side sometimes, or a thumbs down for no. Just really making it easy to follow along for our primary age students. Going to highlight some of the key questions from the grades 1 to 3 survey. Do you feel like you are an important part of the school? 90% of students report that yes, or sometimes they feel like an important part of the school. This is a slight increase from last school year where 89% reported in this category. The next question, do you feel students at school are kind to you? 96% reported yes, or sometimes that students at school are kind to them. It's a slight increase from last year as well, like 94%. Do you feel adults at your school are kind to you? 98% report yes, or sometimes adults at school are kind. Again, a slight increase up from 97% the year before. Do you feel adults at school care about you? 96% of students report that yes, or sometimes feel adults at school care about you, which is pretty consistent with last year's results. The next question, do you feel adults at school help you? 98% report yes, or sometimes feel adults at school help you. Slight increase from previous years. The next question was a new question last school year. I keep trying even when things are hard. 98.42% of students report yes, or sometimes they keep trying even when things are hard. This is up a little bit from last year when 97.15% of students reported that they yes, or sometimes keep trying even when things are hard. The next question is, I have friends to play with at recess. About 97% of students report yes, or sometimes they have friends to play with at recess, up a little bit from last year when it was 96.63%. And the last question was regarding trusted adult. The question reads, when I needed help at school, I have a trusted adult I can go to for support. 95.68% of students report that yes, or sometimes they have a trusted adult they can go to for support. Pretty consistent with last year's results. Last year was 96%. The next area is the grades 4 through 12 survey results. This is an example question from the grades 4 through 12 survey. Overall, how much do you feel like you belong at New Albany Plain Local Schools? There were 2,682 students in grades 4 through 12 that completed the survey this year. First question, how connected do you feel to the adults at school? 81% of students report feeling at least somewhat, quite, or extremely connected for this past school year. It's up a little bit from last year when it was 77%. The next question, how welcoming have you found school to be? 91% of students reporting somewhat, quite, or extremely welcoming. That's also up a little bit from last year, which was 89% overall. The next question, how well do people at school understand you as a person? 88% of students report people at school understand somewhat, quite a bit, or completely. Also up a little bit from last year, which was 84%. How much respect do students in school show you? 86% of students reporting some, quite a bit, or a tremendous amount of respect compared to last year, 83% overall. So also a slight increase. How much respect do teachers and staff in school show you? Overall, 93% of students reporting some, quite a bit, or a tremendous amount of respect, up a little bit from 91%. How much do you matter to others at school? 85% of students responding matter somewhat, quite a bit, or a tremendous amount. Last year, that was 82%, so another slight increase. The next question, participation in school activities was also added last year. It aligns with one of our BIC framework goals of having students involved in an activity. So the question was, do you participate in school activities? And then it gave some examples, band, choir, orchestra, theater, athletics, or clubs. So you can see on here that 45.31% of students participate in more than one. 32.59% participate in one, or 22.10% none at all. Of course, that doesn't mean that they don't participate in community activities. We have a lot of students that are highly engaged throughout our community and the many opportunities that are offered to them. This was looking at school specifically sponsored one. Last year, we had 42.99% participate in more than one, and you can see we're up to 45. So there is a nice little increase in students participating in more than one activity, but like to continue to see students involved and engaged in activities on campus. The next question, I can ask my teacher for help. 97.95% can sometimes or always ask their teacher for help. That's pretty much in line with the results from last year, which was 97.29%. So that one stayed pretty consistent. Trusted adult, I have at least one adult I trust in my school and can go to for help. 75.35% agree or strongly agree that they have a trusted adult. That is up from last year when it was 70.31%. So that is a nice little bump in the overall percentage as well. Next question, overall, how much do you feel like you belong at school? 97% of students indicated some level of belonging at school, with 89% indicating they belong somewhat, quite a bit, or completely. That's also, depending on the category you're looking at there, a nice little increase. You can see from last year, the completely belong went from 30 to 32%, the belong quite a bit from 35 to 38%. The belong somewhat dipped a little bit. The two highest categories saw that increase. This next section is the student belonging survey dashboard within the Qualtrics system, which is what we use to give the survey. There is a belonging survey data dashboard so that each principal and building can filter the results by grade level and look at each question to further dive into the data for their particular building. Just kind of a snapshot of what it looks like with the filters in the top. And then, of course, we apply the R factor across our work. So in owning our results, I will just share a little bit about our response and how we are digging into the data, continue to strive to get better every day. So the data dashboard has been shared actually for quite a while, since we gave it in October and early November. After it was completed, it was shared with building administration to review with their staff. Each building has shared with me some of their early action steps, whether it's staff meetings, meeting with counselors, building level leadership team, staff overviews, discussions, and creation of action plans on specific areas. Each building is going to continue to obviously also engage in listening to student, parent, and staff voices. But there's a lot of building specific action plans and work around this. I could just give a couple of quick examples. The primary school, for example, noticed obviously they want all students to enjoy recess, so they're trying to diversify what's available at recess. So one example of that is they've created a dig box area for kids that want to get out there and really enjoy doing that. The second semester, they're going to be adding musical opportunities for students at recess. So again, just trying to find different avenues and outlets for all kids so that they can engage in that social time with their peers. So that's one example of an action item that kind of came out of debriefing and looking at the data. At the intermediate school, a lot of work in reviewing this with school counselors. They have ongoing RISE assemblies for the school year and have shared the belonging survey to guide the topics. They have their house system that they use to create that sense of belonging and positive announcements. The middle school has also just recently shared their survey data with the staff and discussing trends. They have a lot of things in place too. Action plan for creating a welcoming school by creating place cards on student lockers with their name and a personalized message from staff and administration. Each building has a very long list. I'm just briefly highlighting a few areas here. High school has also dug into their data to share celebrations as a staff, overall positive results. Have created some wonderings and actionable items. One noticing the high school had is that while trusted adult is language used a lot at the elementary level, that's not necessarily something that's been actively used at the secondary level. And so wondering is, if that might impact the survey results and how we can all use the same language when we are interacting with our students. So those are just some brief highlights. I'm happy to share more, but if there's questions, I can take those at this time.
Does the dashboard allow for someone to look at if there's common reasons that students feel either if they're answering the question in the negative or not completely in the positive. So anything from completely, somewhat, not at all, common things that they point to.
So you can break it down, and obviously this is a highlight, but as you saw in some of those examples, it will show the percent or the count, if you want the actual count, of the number of students that responded at a grade level, for example, with each one of those particular areas. This really was meant to be a pulse survey, kind of a brief snapshot. A number of years ago, I think maybe 4 years ago, we used to give a very lengthy SEL survey when we worked with Hanover Research, but it was just very cumbersome and very lengthy. And so we really shortened down to 8 questions at the primary age and about 20, I think it's actually 21 questions at the secondary level. So it really is meant to be a pulse snapshot. And the only it is anonymous, so the only demographic data we are collecting is the grade level. So really the only way to disaggregate it would be by selecting the various grade levels, or narrowing down to a grade level and then looking at the responses, see, each question by the answer choice.
Right.
When it was a little bit lengthier, we did have, questions that kind of checked for that a little bit more, where they might ask about the same theme or topic 3 or 4 different ways, to kind of get at that. And when we transitioned 4 years ago to make it more manageable, more of just a pulse or a snapshot, we don't have as much of that since it's significantly shorter.
Just going to comment. First of all, overall, the results seem like they're trending in the right direction, which, again, this is one measure, right? And
Sure,
this
absolutely.
is the student belonging survey, not
Right.
We've got work to do as a community around this dignity, respect,
Absolutely.
and other issues. But again, great to have the survey and be able to have some quantitative data. I do see the one chart that breaks down by grade level.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything, if we looked at it from a high school, middle school point of view, intermediate school, to see any trends there that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, but I will say that, if you think about a primary school, kids are with, usually one teacher for most of the day. And so they know that one adult probably really, really well. And when you get to the secondary level, you have a 7-period bell schedule. And so you're in and out of classes and things like that. And so I do notice that the older students get, in some of the areas, the numbers dip a little bit for the, I always feel this way, or I extremely feel this way. They're not as high at the upper levels. They still perform very well overall, but for example, got a couple more. I have some data in front of me, but like the teacher completely understands me versus understands quite a bit or understands somewhat. I can understand how a student that spends all day with primarily one teacher in a setting with 25 students might have a different feeling about that than somebody that has a 7-period bell schedule that's in and out every 45 or 50 minutes. At the lower grades, we seem to have a higher percentage of students that more completely understand or understand quite a bit, compared to some of the secondary levels that are more kind of in that understand quite a bit, understand somewhat. There's several questions like that. Yeah.
Also, I noticed you added a few questions. Is there a process or are there any under consideration for next year based upon this data, or if someone has an idea, do they just come to you with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something, we're always looking for feedback from principals or from others. We chose, like I said, a couple of years ago, it felt really cumbersome, I think, to try to have, students complete a 45 or 50 questionnaire on social emotional learning. And with our BIT framework that was adopted at the time and our continuous improvement plan benchmarks, really narrowing in on that belonging. Research does show that students that have a sense of belonging perform better academically, they're more engaged in their school community. And so that was a decision a couple of years ago we made to shorten it, to make it more manageable. And I know at the high school level, to give something a nest is 10 or 12 minutes. That was some of the reasons and rationale why we chose to shorten it, but certainly it's not set in stone, and that's something we could revisit.
Do you think there's anything missing right now based on conversations with the team?
Last year, we added a couple of questions based on feedback from the team and based on some of our BIC framework. And so I know the BIC group, for example, is getting ready to meet, I think actually later this week. And so, if through their debrief and their ongoing work, if they have feedback for us, we'll certainly take that. I haven't been a part of that conversation just yet because I have some meetings coming up, but yeah, we definitely welcome that ongoing discussion.
I think the other piece that's important to understand is when it reinforces what we're doing in kindness, dignity, and respect, specifically as part of the value statement within the school district and ensuring that kids feel safe, supported, and connected. And to Katie's point, overall, the results are very positive,
Yeah.
But there's still opportunity when you think about, well, 15% of the kids in the school district, dominantly at the secondary level, don't believe they matter. So that's a whole nother type of conversation from a developmental perspective, because it reinforces the statement of purpose about the academic and developmental needs of kids. So to Ken's point or Katie's point in the conversation that we had, in the vocabulary like trusted adult, that means something very different at the high school level than it does in Teresa's building for first, second, and third graders, and what we specifically use vocabulary. So then the same thing could be happening in really the definition of matter. Like, how does a high school kid think about that? And their definition could be very different than the person sitting next to them in the classroom about how they interpret that in their relationships with others at school. So I just think we have to be conscious of that, but there's still opportunity for improvement. So although the results are extremely positive, there's still always effort that can be taken for continuous improvement. And I think that's the spirit of why this is looked at, is to try to make sure, and although it's a pulse, we reduced it. It was a very lengthy survey. Kid feedback was survey fatigue. There's too many questions. You have redundancy. You're purposely trying to ask me the question a different way to see if I answer it the same way twice. I mean, all that was built in on the Hanover, and it would take them 30 minutes to do it, and the kids just felt overwhelmed. So now it's very truncated. It's focused. It's 21 questions at the secondary level, 8 or 10. It's 8 at primary. And it's very kid friendly. So but there's still opportunities. So we'll debrief this. I mean, we both have student advisories at the secondary level from the superintendent and the principal. We're going to talk about this with the kids to see what they'll tell us. Did you take it seriously? Was 21 questions too many? Because we don't think it is, but from a kid's perspective, what do they think? And then how could we use this, or what else could we do from a student perspective to help us understand? And that's really where Mr. Kramer, Mr. Freeman will go at the middle school level, Dr. Mamias, and then through student advisories for me, we'll have those conversations to try to talk about from a kid's perspective, what else can we do? We still have a whole nother semester of school to go post winter recess. So there's plenty of opportunity to try to incorporate this feedback because it's early in the school year, which is great. So how can we continue to close the gap on the areas of opportunity? So we will have those conversations and come up with plans to do that.
There's so much value in seeing the same question each year to see if we're moving the needle. Right. And I apologize if you covered this. Can you disaggregate like questions by grade?
On the dashboard, the filter that's on it right now is grade level, so you can see the district as a whole, and then you can say, like, I want to look at grades 1, 2, and 3. What does that look like? Then I want to look at grades 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8. It doesn't show it side by side by side. You have to kind of toggle back and forth, but you can get to what you want.
So like if you wanted to see how 8th graders answered one question, you could look at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what the building principals are doing with their school counselors and staff, is to understand, like in Teresa's building, if first graders are at 99% and the third graders drop to 96%, what happens by the time they become third graders? It's just an interesting conversation. Yeah. And same thing at the middle school and high school. And, again, they're not a cohort. So you have to remember, you're looking at that year's data, and you can go back. 10th graders this year answered X, and what did they say when they were 9th graders? If it's the same question, we can go back and look at that, just to understand that, to see, has it changed from their perspective as they get older? What does that mean? It's easier when you're in the same building. Otherwise, to Katie's point, you have to toggle back and forth between the buildings when you're looking at grade levels, but it's possible. Thank you, Mrs. Noah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next are discussion items, beginning with board liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports this evening?
Yes. So I attended last week a presentation by the Plain Township Fire Department on their new strategic plan. It sort of two or three things struck me. One, Chief Connor who's been in probably maybe a year or 15 months, is certainly focusing on the professionalism of the department. And by that, providing firefighters the training that they need to do their jobs well. Also to make sure that they are being supported both in terms of their health, both physical and mental. There are, in some of these numbers, I didn't realize our department was quite as large as it was. There are 45 full-time employees, 15 part-time, and 6 interns. In 2022, they did 2,900 runs, which is about 8 a day. 110 days, they had 10 or more runs. A good number of those runs are to senior living complexes, and they've had success working with one on establishing when is it appropriate to call the fire department to respond, and they're working with another that because of just transitions in management, they haven't been able to have the same success. I think there is a concern about coverage. They look at 3 things in their total response: alarm handling, which is how long does it take from the time you call to the time you're connected to the station. Turnout time, which is the fire department gets the call and they're on the trucks out the door. And then travel time. And we're fortunate because the school district is so close to the fire department or the fire station. But there are some inefficiencies in alarm handling based on where the call comes from and how it's routed. And so it's possible that, as surprising as this is, that someone's call could get transferred 2 or 3 times before it ends up in the right place. And that's where probably their biggest opportunity to reduce the total response time is. Turnout time is generally within what they would refer to as national standards. So the alarm handling and the travel time, in many cases, they don't use 161 to respond to fires because of the traffic on 161. But it is difficult to run fire trucks through busy or dense areas. So the good news is in the presentation was done by Ben Collins, the township administrator, and the chief, is that they are really looking at the detail of how they run the fire department, and looking for ways to be more efficient. They reworked their mission statement, and mission statement is, together we save lives through education, engagement, and emergency services. They are committed to doing education with businesses on how to reduce risks of fire, engaging with the community, and in terms of the emergency services, I think that there's because they receive so many EMS calls to respond to, say, senior living facilities, looking at whether it's actually necessary to add another vehicle that would be available to respond. Good news is they are part of a mutual mutual aid network. So when they are responding to fires and additional calls come in, they have other departments that will cover. At the same time, our fire station can be called to do mutual aid. And so they're busy. During the time that in the meeting, there was at least 2 calls, 2 alarms. The meeting only lasted, 2 hours. So it's kind of being in the fire station and appreciating the activity, I think is one of the things that they would encourage people to do. They'd like to have actually more people meeting in the fire station. There's, conference rooms that they can use because when they're in the building, they have a better appreciation of the activity. I remember as a young boy, my house was kind of right off one of the main fire routes. So you'd hear the fire trucks. I would say generally, I don't hear them when they're responding, but they are responding.
Yeah.
So I think, in the absence of hearing them, sometimes there could be feeling like they're not really utilized that much, and they are.
Thanks for the report, Mark, and it's excellent chili over there. And if you're ever taking your young kids over there for the helicopter dropping down and the soap bubbles, I can't remember when it is because my kids are a little bit older now, but it's amazing.
I think they just had it.
Okay.
Yeah, big turnout for it.
Next year. I just report briefly, Debbie, President Kalinowski and I had a great discussion with several community members. We set a time last Thursday from 6 to 7:30, and we had a steady stream of community members, parents come in just asking questions, some of which were things we could address early on, and we've already started some follow-up, and so those parents will be hearing from members of the district administration. Others are long-term challenges and opportunities that our schools are facing, and we had a lot of great feedback on a whole host of topics that really did run the gamut. One of the nice things about being there in an informal setting was we could actually sit across the desk and exchange different forms of communication. We were listening to books being read. We were listening to, we were looking at the computer screens and seeing what was on curriculum for particular classes. We're drawing maps, and we're drawing maps of the parking lot, looking at some of the challenges that our district is facing. So again, very constructive to be able to work together in that way. And I know President Kalinowski is working on setting the next set of those probably in January or February, likely with Mr. McClelland and Mr. Wilson at the helm of that. So thanks everybody for coming out. I encourage you to come out next time. We met at the library, but maybe next time we'll go to the fire department. So, good idea.
Good idea.
All right, thank you. Are there any other updates? All right, next is board policy, Superintendent Sawyers.
President Kalinowski, members of the board, this is the second reading for adoption this evening of the change that legislatively incorporated updates to the school calendar language and board policy relative to online virtual makeup opportunities based upon changes by the General Assembly. So if there's any questions, I can answer them, but there's been no changes to the document since I presented it last month.
With none, may I have a motion and a second for treasurer's items A through B, please?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Darrow and Mr. Wilson, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you. I have 2 items. Monthly financials, I'm asking you to approve both October and November, but I want to focus just on November because that's the latest, greatest. On the revenue side, we are running ahead of estimates. We're about 3% ahead on our real estate tax collection, and that would be the final collection for the second half, which has just occurred in September. Keep a track. I will keep an eye on that to see what's causing that, but it's really within 3%, so not too far off. One area, income tax sharing, is about $600,000 higher than estimates. I don't know what's driving that. I'm going to continue to watch that to see if that was a timing in payment or if there might be something else driving that, and that will actually end up being a conversation with the city of New Albany because that's the income tax sharing with them. And then we're also saying we're, for the fiscal year to date, about $500,000 higher in our unrestricted grants or state aid. And that's because the House Bill 33, the increase that we got from that we didn't start getting that until in October. So you're going to start to see a little bit more money there as we catch up on those payments. But by the end of the fiscal year, that will even out and we'll end where we thought we would based on the October forecast. Then if we're looking at expenditures, we're running under budget in all areas. The biggest though, and it's going to continue to be the biggest, is capital outlay, because we only spend those funds when we absolutely have to, because we have the permanent improvement levy. However, if we don't spend those funds by the end of the fiscal year, typically we transfer those into permanent improvement to be used on other projects that we may have in the future. And then I'm happy to answer any of the monthly financial questions. And then on the appropriation modifications, we have 2 student activities. I'm asking you to increase that appropriation by $1,000 due to the high school yearbook, and then district managed activity, which is athletics, $47,000, and that's based on boys basketball athletic camps. And so there are revenue sources to go along with those increases. Happy to answer any questions.
With none, Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Vice President Newmaw?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Now may I have a motion and a second for superintendent's items A through C, please?
So moved. Second.
A through D, please.
Second.
I need a
Or do you need a
motion.
motion?
So moved.
Okay, now second.
Mr. Newmoff and Mr. McClellan, Superintendent Sawyer.
President Kalinowski, members of the board, letter A for personnel or standard employee action items pursuant to the terms and conditions of employment for Plain Local Education Association and or OPC Local 302. Letter B for general business, call your attention to a few things. We are approving the new courses that were proposed last month for the middle school and high school for the 2024-25 school year. It comes in tandem with the recommendation this evening to approve the high school program of studies for registration for New Albany High School in 2024-25, which will begin in January. The approval of technology this evening. So as part of our technology cycle, we replace teacher laptops. The next laptops due for replacement within the school district or high school faculty. So we have a quote this evening from Apple, not to exceed $235,300 for the replacement of the high school faculty laptops through the Permanent Improvement Fund. That was part of our plan for capital repair and replacement. The laptops do last 5 years, so they do qualify. Non-athletic field trips this evening, as well as athletic field trips, are on the agenda also for approval. Letter C, donations. As always, we're very grateful for the philanthropic support within our community for all the different clubs, groups, activities, and things that happen, both from PTOs, New Albany Community Foundation, or others. And then lastly is the approval letter D for the board policy I previously spoke to.
Are there any questions?
I have a question, Michael. What happens to the old computers?
They actually get refurbished, they're cleaned and then resold for resale purposes, if possible. So if they have a value, they will be sold back to a vendor. So we do resale, recycling. Mr. Voss and his team do an excellent job of getting us the biggest bang for the buck from the highest bidder.
Right?
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Vice President Newmaw?
Yes.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Before we adjourn this evening, I would like to take a moment of personal privilege to recognize the 8 years that Phil has served on our school board. 8 years is a long time to dedicate to anything. And we've been through some challenging times during those 8 years. When Phil first joined the board, we had a devastating levy failure. We had to lay off over 100 staff members. Our superintendent resigned. And since then, we have adopted a statement of purpose. We hired a wonderful superintendent. We created values for the district, and we managed through a global pandemic. Those are just a few highlights. But I wanted to make sure to take this opportunity to thank Phil for 8 years of commitment and dedication to our community and our schools, and wish you very much happiness and success in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
And I know that you would like to take a moment of personal privilege as well.
If
so
you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, so I'll start this this way. It's the best job I ever had, and I'll explain a little bit why. But here we are. This is my last regular public meeting as a member of the New Albany Plain Local Board of Education, and for some, well, no doubt this will be a reason for celebration. For many others, however, the loss of an experienced voice for fiscal sanity, academic excellence, and avoiding policies and programming that take us outside of our core role is a cause for concern. I'm grateful for all my fellow board members and administrators because I'm actually not concerned. I know that we'll continue to do the right things. Over the 8 years of my service, I've often been asked why I would ever willingly take on such a thankless job. And even though I love the 40 years at my work, building my business, I've consistently replied to that question that this really is the best job that I've ever had. As I detailed in my June 27th post at philipdarrow.com, shameless plug, public service is an honor, and it really should be a temporary one. When you've accomplished your goals, I think it's time to move on. When I was first elected, as President Kalinowski said, our district faced an unsustainable fiscal time bomb and really a profound lack of focus on core academic excellence. I could tell stories about a particular administrator who's in the room tonight, and I won't name them, but showed me a to-do list 1 year into our new statement of purpose and new superintendent. And the to-do list had 6 items on it, double spaced, barely took up a small portion of a page, and said that was great. And I said, okay, how's that different from a year prior? And they turned around, picked up a few pages, single spaced both sides, and said this was my to-do list before. And so the focus and ability to really stay focused on what matters, that was pretty eye-opening for me. I knew we were on the right track. I didn't realize just how impactful it was. As I wrote in that June 27th post, money doesn't drive educational outcomes, focus does. My experience building my business to more than $500 million and 1,400 employees was invaluable to solving the problems of an enterprise with a $75 million budget and 700 employees. While the specific challenges of an organization focused on primary and secondary education are different than those in industry, the process for solving them is the same. Identify the organization's core purpose and focus the right resources there. While children most certainly are not widgets, the objective evidence is overwhelmingly clear that schools focused on core academic curriculum, including music and the arts, produce better outcomes and opportunities for their students than those that don't. These principles have always guided my work, including my determination to keep our students in school during COVID, where they could see and interact with their teachers and friends, and in keeping our school out of responsibilities that rightly belong to them. The objective evidence is overwhelmingly in support of those judgments. Having accomplished every objective I promised the voters in each of my 2 elections, it's time to return to being an engaged citizen, and I will be. I am fully retired from my business, and my wife is finishing her service on the Columbus Metropolitan Library Foundation board. We look forward to traveling without the need to be back for meetings every couple of weeks, and I'll have even more time to pursue my passions and hobbies, and of course, more writing for, shameless plug, philipdarrow.com. I'm profoundly grateful to all those I've worked with these past 8 years, as I have learned so much. I've learned so much from each and every one of you. As we just heard, being in the buildings, as you said, Mr. Wilson, being in the fire department and hearing and seeing what's going on is profoundly educational. And in a conversation with President Kalinowski yesterday, in fact, she commented that we've learned a lot, and only we know what it's like to be in these seats and to be in this role. And there's no way to know what it's like, what actually happens in a school, without being with the people who are in school, without being with teachers, students, administrators. It makes a really, really big difference. And you don't know until you know. I'm profoundly grateful for each and every one of you. While the board sets the goals, we would not have achieved them without the hard work that our educators, staff members, administrators, what you do every day to make it happen for our students. I'm particularly grateful to have had the good fortune to have hired. I've told the story several times of the first time we interviewed Mr. Sawyers. Mr. Sawyers was our first interview. He was the assistant superintendent at the time. And after the interview with Mr. Sawyers, I was ready to have no more interviews. President Kalinowski and I were the interviewers, and I left that room and I said, if this were a private enterprise, I'd hire him on the spot. But we're not a private enterprise, we're a public one, and we interviewed several others, and I'm happy we ended up with Superintendent Sawyers. Mr. Sawyers is one of the finest leaders of any organization I've ever known. Little of what we accomplished these past 8 years would have happened without his skill in turning policy into the actions that produce demonstrable results for kids every day. I leave our school in a much better place financially and academically than when I first joined the board, and I'm confident my 4 colleagues here tonight and our new board member joining next month will continue to be good stewards of this wonderful school.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
I would just like to say thank you as well, Phil. It's been my pleasure to work with you for 8 years. You've given a lot of statements and speeches over the years, and that was your best.
Wow, trying to take that yet.
I think that one, you will find universal agreement, near universal agreement. We are on the Board of Education. There will not be universal agreement, but I think there'll be a lot of agreement with what you said there. So I would just like to personally thank you as well. I mean, when you got involved alongside myself 8+ years ago, I will acknowledge we thought this was about finances as well as academic improvement, and it was. And are we better off now than we were 8 years ago? I think, again, absolutely yes. And thank you for everything you've done to help that move forward. You were right. You brought your business acumen to this. You encouraged the board to set forth a statement of purpose that has been nearly universally adopted across this district and helps us stay centered on what is most important. So I do thank you for that. You also added something, which is why we will all continue, which is continuous improvement. I think everybody knows that we're about continuous improvement, but you made it very front and center about what we're all about. And we will, I know our fellow board members, administrators, teachers, staff, everyone, I know we will stay focused on that because we care about the kids. And I know you care about the kids. I know that's why you got involved. You don't even have kids in this district at the time. And you haven't had for many years, even in any district. So, except for your daughter who's taking law school finals, I feel bad for her right now. But you made this mission of yours as part of your community service to help us improve our district. So, as someone who has 4 children in this district, it just gets chills when I see, as I walked around a lot of this community over the fall, it's really great to hear from our community about how far we've come. Not that we're not going to continuously improve. So, Phil, thank you for all that you've done. We're going to miss you. I will miss your speeches. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. And again, it's been a pleasure to work with you, and I hope that you and Barb and your daughter get a chance to have some more uninterrupted vacations going forward. So, thank you.
Well, I don't think we need to talk more about the accomplishments. So just a quick personal note, I guess. I didn't know Phil before he joined the board. And I remember, I'm trying to think, it might have been our first board retreat. I can't remember. But sitting around the table. Well, that's why I'm going to say it. It was a little bit of a contentious retreat. But I remember thinking to myself, who is this guy? You know, because, as you could imagine, Phil had his opinions. He was very direct. I'm like, this guy just got here, like, you know, chill out for a minute. So I guess I'm saying that because I think there's you know, when you take this role, in any role in public service, you know, you're kind of in a little bit of a fishbowl, you're under a little bit of a microscope, and you know, people see a version of you that they think that they know. But I didn't know Phil. That was just my initial impression. And it wasn't right. You know, over the last several years, you know, I was, with some of the turnover that happened on the board, I moved into the board president role. Phil became vice president. So we had a lot of time together, spent a lot of time in meetings, in conversation, debate. Contrary to popular belief, we don't always agree on this board, but we had to work to come to consensus. And what I appreciated about Phil and what I learned about Phil while getting to know him was he's extremely well-read, well-prepared, not as well-prepared as Michael Sawyer's is at times, but that's a different level.
Standard.
It's a different level. But well-prepared, thoughtful, but also very strong in his conviction and willing to fight for his position. And you had to be ready when you had those conversations. And whether we ended up agreeing or not, I became a better board member because of it. I became a better person because of it. I think, you know, you're always looking for those types of connections and relationship in your life, whether it's personal or business, to help you grow. And you know, again, we haven't always agreed, but I think I'm a better person because of the relationship we have. And I appreciate the investment that you put into this work. No one is ever going to know the amount of time and energy and effort that gets put into the work that goes in here. And so I thank you for that. And I wish you the best of luck and everything else that you do. And I'm sure that at some point in time, we'll be in here, and through that door for public participation is going to walk Bill Derrick. So this won't be the end, but I appreciate it. So, and it's also just I'm going to go there. It's a reminder to everyone out there that before you make a judgment about somebody, before you post something on social media, before you have some agenda that you want to pursue, take the time to talk to someone, take the time to get to know them. You might find you have more in common than you think.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
That brings us to adjournment for this evening. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Darrow and Mr. Newmaw. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Vice President Newmaw?
Yes.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Our next meeting is on Monday, January 8th. At 5 p.m., we will hold our 2024 organizational meeting, and immediately following, we'll hold our regular meeting at this location. Thank you very much and happy holidays.